Alright, what lessons should you have drawn from the beach drinks game that we played in class? And there's a few lessons. The first lesson has to do with something that happens with game theory problems, that there can be a first mover or a last mover advantage. And of course, in that particular game, there was a last mover advantage, but sometimes there's a first mover advantage. So it's just something to think about when you're thinking about games where there's sequential moves, where one player moves, then another player sees what they did and follows that. Sequential moves games can have advantages to either going first or last, depending on the game's structure. The second thing you should have learned from this is that you've seen for yourself how firms enter and exit until profits are normal. And normal profits are, of course, profits you need to make it worthwhile to participate, worthwhile to be in the industry, rather than going off to your next best option. So if we played this more rounds where we had lots of firms and they entered and exit, you could imagine what might happen. Each player, each group that was playing, each business would say, how much money do I need to make from this endeavor for it to be worth my time? And that's going to give you a value on your time, a value of if you weren't doing the business, what would you be doing out playing on the beach? So it needs to be more valuable in cash for playing in the business than it is to doing that next best option, which is of course your opportunity cost. The third thing you should have gotten from this exercise is you notice how firms locate near each other once they've figured out the optimal strategy in the game, and you see that in real life. You see businesses like two competing grocery stores across the street from one another rather than spreading out. You see gas stations across the street from one another rather than spreading out. And the reason for that is analogous to the reason you discovered through playing this game. Okay, the last thing you should have learned from this game has to do with monopolistic competition and the fact that firms arrange themselves according to people's preferences. So in the game, people preferred to be around certain areas where there were seals to see and where there were beach volleyball games going on. And the firms sort of naturally figured out where are the people located and naturally went to that spot. And in this case, location was very straightforward and obvious. It's just where are you located on the beach. But this also applies with products that have sort of a spectrum along which firms can choose to locate. And the example of that I like to use is the spectrum of sugar in cereals. So let me show you that. Okay, so if you look at people's cereal preferences, there's a lot of people that prefer low sugar cereals, and then there's a lot of people that prefer high sugar cereals, and maybe some people in the middle. And you have an optimal type of cereal that you target. So the cereals are going to sort of figure this out naturally, where this is basically a histogram where people prefer along the sugar cereal spectrum. So you might imagine, where do you sit? And if you are someone who kind of likes a medium amount of sugar, but there's only a firm over here, a cereal over here, and a cereal up here, you're going to go to the cereal that's closest to your preferences, even though it's not perfect. In the same way that you went to the place on the beach that was closest to where you were located. And of course, as cereals enter this market, they're going to be more heavily populated around the amounts of sugar that have the greatest population preferences built around that. Now, I will say cereal companies are actually more oligopolistic. There's actually not that many of them. It's not that every single cereal is its own brand and its own company, but I'm setting it up like this just to illustrate the fact that location and closeness to your optimal preference can be something that can be one way of modeling monopolistic competition.